Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a conflict that's as old as humanity itself, our never-ending war against weeds.
So, what exactly is a weed? Well, it's pretty simple. Just a plant in the wrong place at the wrong time. And for as long as we've farmed, we've been locked in a battle with these unwanted guests. They're competing for the absolute basics, right? Sunlight, water, and all those precious nutrients in the soil. For decades, it felt like we had finally found the ultimate weapon against them, a chemical arsenal that gave us a huge advantage. But what went wrong? To really get that, we have to understand this incredible story of how our best weapon didn't just stop working, it actually kicked evolution into hyperdrive. So let's dive into farming's oldest battle. This chemical arsenal really did promise a whole new era. Let's take a look at how this revolution got started and the powerful tool it gave us, the herbicide.
Okay, so what are herbicides? Well, think of them like super specialized keys. They're engineered to fit into very specific biological locks inside a plant, usually a single critical enzyme. And when that key turns, it shuts down a process that's vital for the plant's survival. And boom, the weed dies. For a long time, this was just an incredibly elegant and frankly devastatingly effective solution.
But then came the plot twist, a big one. Because under all that pressure, the weeds started to fight back. They started changing the locks. And this is where we get to the heart of the matter, herbicide resistance. Now, this is so important to understand. It's an inherited ability. We're not just talking about one tough plant that manages to survive. No, this is a genetic trait that gets passed down from one generation to the next. So really, it wasn't a failure of the chemical itself, but an incredible real-time demonstration of evolution. And you know, this isn't some new thing that just cropped up. The alarm bells on this have been ringing for decades. Seriously. Way back in 1963, farmers up in Canada started noticing that wild carrot was just shrugging off a herbicide that used to work perfectly. Then by 1970, the same thing was happening with common groundsel down in Washington. The evolutionary arms race was officially on. And it gets even trickier because this resistance isn't a simple one-size-fits-all problem. There are actually two types. First, you've got cross-resistance. That's where a weed figures out a defense against one key, and that same defense just happens to work on other similar keys. But then there's multiple resistance, and this is the scary one. That's when a weed evolves defenses against completely different kinds of keys, turning it into a genuine super weed that is just so hard to control.
I mean, just take a look at this chart to see how massive the problem has gotten. See that first bar? That's for ALS inhibitors, a super common type of herbicide. Well, they are now totally useless against a whopping 142 different species of weeds. You can see the other types are in trouble too, but the sheer fact that we overuse this one specific key so much has led to this widespread, catastrophic failure all over the world. So the big question is, how on earth are they doing this? How are these plants fighting back? Well, let's zoom in, way in. We're going to go from the farmer's field all the way down to the molecular level to see the playbook these weeds are running. Okay, this is probably the most crucial takeaway of this whole thing. Herbicides don't create resistant weeds. The mutations for resistance already exist out there in the population, just due to random genetic chance. What the herbicide does is act like a giant filter. It wipes out all the susceptible weeds, leaving behind that 1 in a million plant that happened to have the right mutation. And then, that survivor gets to reproduce and pass on its winning lottery ticket genes to the next generation. So what's in this playbook? Scientists have basically figured out it comes down to 3 main strategies. First, the weed can change the lock itself. The target site gets altered, so our key just doesn't fit anymore. Second, it can develop a super-powered metabolism, basically creating its own little antidote to break down the poison before it does damage. And third, something called sequestration. The plant literally grabs the herbicide and shoves it into a cellular prison where it can't cause any trouble. Let's make this real with the most famous herbicide in the world, glyphosate, which you probably know as Roundup. Now, the genius of glyphosate is how targeted it is. It works by blocking just one specific enzyme in a plant's biological pathway. It's called EPSPS. By blocking that one single enzyme, you shut down the plant's ability to make certain amino acids, which are basically life's essential building blocks. Without those, the plant just starves. It can't grow, and it dies. But the story doesn't stop inside the plant. See, herbicides like glyphosate don't just vanish into thin air after they're sprayed. They can hang around in the soil, which can affect the crops you plant later. They can also bind up with important nutrients in the ground, changing the soil's chemistry. It creates this whole complex ripple effect throughout the ecosystem that, frankly, we're still trying to fully wrap our heads around. But here's the thing. This isn't all just nature doing its thing. In a really ironic twist, it turns out our own farming practices have accidentally created the perfect training ground, like an evolutionary boot camp for creating superweeds. Think about it. When we use the same exact herbicide over and over again, year after year, we're applying this massive, relentless selection pressure. When we plant huge fields with just one single crop, that's called monocropping, we create the perfect uniform environment for one resistant weed to just explode. And every time we let those few surviving weeds go to seed, we're basically handpicking the strongest parents for the next, even tougher generation. Okay, so if the chemical tools are starting to fail, what's the next move in this giant chess match with nature? Well, the answer was to stop playing by the old rules and instead completely rewrite the rulebook by turning to genetic engineering. This is where it gets really clever. Instead of trying to find a new way to kill the weed, scientists flipped the problem around and asked, what if we could make the crop immune to the herbicide? And they came up with 3 brilliant strategies. 1, give the crop a gene that lets it detoxify the herbicide. 2, engineer the crop to overproduce the target enzyme, so there's just too much of it for the herbicide to block. Or 3, give the crop a modified version of the enzyme that the herbicide can't even bind to. Just genius. And this tech is everywhere now. A huge percentage of our staple crops, think corn, soybeans, cotton, have been engineered this way. You've probably heard the term Roundup Ready. That's what this is. It means farmers can spray their fields with glyphosate, kill all the weeds, and the crop itself is totally fine. But as you can probably guess, this powerful new solution isn't the end of the story. Like any huge technological leap, it's opened up a whole new can of worms, a new set of benefits, a new set of risks, and a lot of passionate debate about the future of our food. On one side, the proponents will tell you these crops are an absolute game changer. They make it possible to do things like no-till farming, which is fantastic for preventing soil erosion and keeping carbon in the ground. And for the farmers themselves, it means simpler, more effective weed control and less damage to their crops. That's a huge win for their bottom line. But then you have the other side, where critics are raising some really serious questions. For instance, what if these powerful new genes escape and cross-pollinate with wild weeds, creating an even worse superweed that we have no way to control? Are we just treating one kind of intense selection pressure for another one, basically just kicking the can down the road? And then there are the real-world risks, right? Like herbicide drifting over to a neighbor's organic farm. And that really brings us right back to where we started. From pulling weeds by hand centuries ago to molecular engineering today, we've always been innovating. But it seems like for every move we make, nature is right there, ready with a countermove. So the challenge now isn't just about finding the next silver bullet, it's about figuring out smarter, more diverse, and more sustainable strategies for a battle that, honestly, is probably never ever going to be over.